Ahoy, and welcome back to Leo's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself something nice to drink, and let's get started. Today we will be going over the worst books that I read in 2022. I guess maybe I should put the disclaimer that this is all my personal opinion, and this isn't meant to be mean in any way. This is just for entertainment, and if you enjoy these books, or if you wrote these books, feel free to ignore my opinion. I'm just one person. I'm sure there are plenty of people who did enjoy these books. Actually, I know there are a lot of people who enjoyed some of them. But they were just not for me. And I'm here to have a good time and do a little cathartic ranting. So if you'd like to join me on that, let's get into it. So I'll be doing this list in chronological order from when I read them. So starting with the first book I didn't like this year that I read in January, I think, was For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten, which is a YA fantasy retelling of Red Riding Hood. This takes place in a world where the firstborn daughter is for the throne, meaning that she is the heir, and the secondborn daughter is for the wolf, meaning she is to be sacrificed to the wolf in the wood in hopes that he'll return their world's captured gods. Our protagonist, Red, because of course her name is Red, is almost relieved to go because her whole life she's been plagued with this mysterious and dangerous power that puts the people close to her in danger. Only when Red reaches the woods, she learns that the legends that she grew up with are a lie, and the wolf is in fact not a monster, but a man. This is the only book that I didn't finish this year, and one of only like 3 or 4 books that I've ever not finished in my whole life. Because I just couldn't take it anymore after like 150 pages, I think, is how far I got. I couldn't finish this book because it committed one of my biggest pet peeves. The cardinal sin of characters not talking like real people. And I'm not talking about elevated language or like purple prose. I'm actually a sucker for any kind of like hoity-toity fancy purple writing. I really like it, as long as it's done well and it's consistent throughout and it kind of like fits thematically. But no, these characters don't speak in elevated language. They just don't communicate in a way that any rational human being would. And it was so frustrating. There is no logic in the way that they are speaking. It's just very clear that the author can't have certain questions be answered right now. So instead of doing the logical thing of, trying to find out what's going on, after finding out that everything she believed in since she was a child was an abject lie, Red just goes, "Oh, wow, I'm so tired. I'm gonna go sleep this one off and deal with this in the morning." Like, There's this other scene pretty shortly after that where she goes outside and there are these gates that kind of separate the wolf's manor house from the woods, and she knows that there's something in the woods that is after her. So she goes outside and sees the gate, and at the gate she sees somebody from her village that she knows shouldn't be there, knows it should be basically impossible for them to be there. But she starts talking to them, and we get descriptions of, like, he said in an inhuman snarl, or, like, his eyes gleamed with a malevolence that I'd never seen before. So, as a reader, I'm thinking, oh, she sees that something's wrong. She's cluing into this. But then her actions don't follow suit, and she almost opens the gate for them. And the only reason she doesn't is because she's saved by Wolfman. Like, nowhere else in the book is it indicated that she is naive or gullible. So I guess she just decided to cosplay as stupid for a bit so that we could get some tension? So, yeah, moments where it's just like very blatantly obvious that the writer needed to have a certain thing happen or not happen are just a huge pet peeve for me. And the first 150 pages of this book was so full of that I just gave up. And I couldn't do it anymore. I'm so frustrated. That might be the best I'm getting. Next one I'm going to talk about is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, which is a Greek mythology retelling. It is about Ariadne, who is a princess of Crete, along with her young sister. And while they live in, they're quite well off, being royalty, but their lives are marred by the Minotaur, which is a half-man, half-beast, specifically half-bull, that lives in a labyrinth beneath the city, who demands a blood sacrifice once a year, and who is also Ariadne's half-brother. It's a long story. When Theseus, a prince of Athens, arrives to vanquish the monster, Ariadne sees in him a means of escaping her home and decides to help him in his quest. I was really excited about this one. So once again, we are dealing with some snowstorms where I live. So, if you hear any noises like that, please ignore them. If I wait for all of them to pass, we'll be here for an age. Back to the book. So I was really excited about this book. I love Greek mythology. I love retellings of old stories. I love giving voices to characters in stories who maybe didn't have as much of a voice in their original stories, especially if those are female characters. And this book ended up confusing me, because I'm not sure what exactly it was going for. If it was going for a typical Greek tragedy storyline, just with a female voice at the center, then I would say it did that quite well. But that's not what it was marketed as, and that's not what I understood it to be. My understanding was that this book would be giving a voice to Ariadne, who in most versions of the Theseus myth is done quite dirty. So I thought this would be maybe a little bit of empowerment for her, no matter what her end is, giving her a little bit more agency, giving her a little bit more of a voice, a little more say in her story, or more like her side of the story. And if that's what it was trying to do, then in my personal opinion, it did not succeed. Ariadne still meets a tragic fate, and she only had very slightly more agency in this story than in the original. Both her and her sister Phaedra, I think her name is Phaedra, I'm pretty sure her name is Phaedra, seem to just utterly lose their minds, or just like utterly lose all of their reasoning and logic when it comes to their respective love interests, which is just disappointing to see, frankly. And which, like I said, if the idea was to do a Greek tragedy sort of thing where, like, they can't escape their fate, then it does make sense for them to be struck with, like, a madness from some god or other. But it's just sad, and we're never, like, given anything detailed to specifically say if that's what it was, so it was kind of, like, muddled. I'm not sure if it was just unfortunate writing or if it was intentional. And it was just really sad to see what I thought was going to be a somewhat empowering story about a woman whose voice is often overshadowed end up being about two women who give up everything for their love interests and die because of it. Sorry for the spoiler. And I struggle to understand if that was the intention. I just don't know why we needed that story, because we have that kind of story over and over again. And I was just like, the more I think about it, the more like disappointed I get that we got that storyline again, because I think we can do better. But if you really liked it, then I know a lot of people did really like this story, so power to you. Yeah, it did not have that kind of effect on me. On a lighter note, the next book on the list is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Saenz, which is a YA LGBTQ plus contemporary romance, I guess? Is it contemporary if it's set in the 80s? I think so. The 80s weren't that far away, right? It is about two boys, Aristotle and Dante, who meet one summer and develop a special bond that grows the more they get to know each other, and they help each other discover important truths about themselves and the world around them. So this is one of the better books on this list. This is one that I would still recommend to people if they were looking for a queer romance or a queer YA romance. And there were things that I did enjoy about it, like the story overall I thought was good, and I liked the characters. But the writing, it's not that the writing was bad, it's just that it was a stylistic choice that I did not vibe with. The writing is very choppy and very repetitive and like circular, and it just left me so frustrated. And if it was just one character who spoke like this, I think I could overlook it. But it was every character that used this like jagged way of speaking with really short sentences that often repeated several times over the course of a conversation. And it was just too much for me. Like I said, I don't think this book is objectively bad. I would definitely understand if someone told me that they loved it, but it just wasn't for me. Next one is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelidas, which is a mystery thriller. In this book, the titular silent patient is Alicia Berenson, and Alicia lived a seemingly picture-perfect life as a famous artist in a loving marriage with a renowned photographer. That is, until one day when she shoots her husband 5 times and never speaks a word again. Several years later, psychotherapist Theo is determined to solve the mystery of Alicia's silence and why she killed her husband. So this story had me in the first half, not gonna lie. There is something very unsettling about it from the very beginning, and it did make for an effective thriller. And the twist, as far as twists go, it's pretty juicy. I will admit that I didn't see it coming, and while I initially questioned whether or not it made sense, I think ultimately it did, and it did connect things pretty well, for the most part. But there were too many things that I had to just let slide in order to get there, especially the ending. The ending kind of shat the bed. So one of the main things that bothered me was how Alicia was written. It's very disgusting, and I hated it so much. Alicia is very often described as being childlike, but in the same breath, they will describe her as being seductive. And frankly, that's just disgusting. Especially as those words are often being said by her therapists and the other mental health professionals that work at the clinic. That's just gross. No mental health professional should be, no one should be attributing childlike and seductress qualities to the same person because children are not seductive. It's like that whole born sexy yesterday trope that I hate so much. And yeah, it was just so gross and also irresponsible a little bit to have your mental health professionals in your book talk about their patients like that, because there are people who have experienced real trauma at the hands of mental health professionals that still need help from mental health professionals, and now you're further making them look bad. And now it might even be harder for somebody to try to reach out to a mental health professional if they're if they're just gonna sexualize me. I don't want that. So I have a lot of opinions. So this next thing that I'm going to talk about it's not really a spoiler. The mildest spoiler maybe, I don't think I don't think it will actually spoil anything if you still want to read this book at the end of this review. But if you want 000 spoilers, I would just skip ahead to the next one. Alright, here we go. The other main problem that I had, which is one of those like little things that you have to overlook in order for anything to make sense. And this one was just too big for me to look over. And that was, for the very, very end, you don't have access to pens or pencils in a mental institution. They straight up won't give you one unless you're being supervised, because you could be a danger to others or yourself. So that kind of makes the whole end impossible. And there's a lot of plot contrivances like that are really hard for me to ignore. Like, how did Alicia smuggle in her diary if she was taken there directly after being arrested? Why is nobody questioning why Theo, a therapist, is doing investigative work? Where did Alicia get a pen? So, while I think it's a fine thriller novel, and if you are, aware that the mental health professional representation is really poor, and you're able to kind of like separate that from reality, it's fine. And if you like thriller novels, you'd probably enjoy it. I just can't get over how many plot contrivances there are, or how disgusting and frankly irresponsible it can be towards the mental health field. On to a more fun one. So the last one on the list is Uzumaki by Junji Ito, which is a horror manga, and it's about a town that's being haunted by a spiral. So I know this is a very beloved manga collection written by a very beloved manga artist, but it made me so angry. Because here's the thing. The town and the people in it are ever so slowly being contaminated by spirals. It starts small with just one person, and then little by little it spreads, and more unsettling and downright terrifying things start happening. And yet nobody leaves! Especially our main character, Kirie, who is often, the first witness to the most horrific things going on. She sees it firsthand, and she just doesn't leave! Why? Literally, why? What is keeping her here? And if we'd been given an explanation as to why she couldn't leave, if we'd seen her having some sort of conversation with her parents about why she couldn't leave, then fine, I'd buy it. At least it would be something. But we never get that. Instead, anytime her boyfriend very reasonably suggests that they leave, she's just like,
"What? No!
Are you kidding me?" Kirie is way too determined to be the lead in a horror story, and it made me so angry. I couldn't immerse myself in it, because every time some new horrific thing would come along, I'd be like, wow, this sure seems like an excellent time to haul ass out of here, and nobody would. Now I'm mad all over again. And those were my worst books of 2022. Let me know what your worst book that you read in 2022 was. I would love to not read it. And if you enjoyed any of the books on this list, please let me know. I mean, I know Uzumaki and Aristotle and Dante Discover Badebada are like quite pretty beloved. So I would love to hear why. Why? Well, that is all for today. So if you would like to find me elsewhere, you can find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess, or you can also find my little embroidery and art store, Moonly Cat Creations. or you can go directly to its website, moonlycatcreations.com. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay cozy.